Welcome to FIFA World Cup 2026, hosted across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Amid the excitement of the world's biggest soccer tournament, one unforgettable story captured an entire stadium. This is the story of a single dad, a powerful CEO, and a moment that left 80,000 fans speechless. $10,000 says you can't juggle that soccer ball 50 times, the CEO said into a live microphone, and the crowd laughed. What happened next would leave an entire stadium speechless and force one of the most powerful women in sports media to question everything she thought she knew about greatness. The late afternoon sun poured through the open sections of Harbor Point Stadium, casting long golden shadows across thousands of empty seats. Workers hurried through the aisles preparing for the city's annual youth sports fundraiser. Vendors rolled carts into position. Camera crews adjusted tripods. The smell of fresh-cut grass drifted upward from the field below. At the very top of Section 118, Caleb Mercer pushed a maintenance cart slowly down the concrete walkway. His faded gray work shirt carried the logo of the stadium. His baseball cap shaded tired eyes that had seen more life than most people could imagine. To nearly everyone around him, he was just another maintenance worker. Just another middle-aged single dad earning an honest paycheck. "Dad, you missed a spot," a cheerful voice called. Caleb looked over and smiled. 11-year-old Sophie Mercer sat on a folded seat nearby swinging her sneakers above the concrete. She pointed dramatically toward a tiny piece of trash near the railing. "Good catch," Caleb said. "I'd be lost without quality control." Sophie grinned proudly. It was summer break, and whenever she could, she spent afternoons with her father at the stadium. The two of them had developed their own quiet rhythm over the years. No complaints. No self-pity. Just gratitude for another day together. Down on the field, excitement suddenly surged through the crowd. Black SUVs rolled through the service entrance. Security personnel straightened immediately. Cameras turned. A sleek figure stepped onto the turf. Charlotte Bennett had arrived. At 36, she was one of the most recognizable executives in sports media. Her company streamed games across the country, sponsored major leagues, and shaped athletic careers with a single contract. Elegant, confident, and remarkably successful, Charlotte moved with the kind of certainty that came from always being the most powerful person in the room. Applause followed her wherever she went. Today was no exception. "That's Charlotte Bennett," Sophie whispered. "I know," Caleb replied quietly. Charlotte stepped onto a temporary stage built near midfield. Her voice echoed through the stadium speakers as she welcomed guests and donors. The audience responded with laughter and applause at nearly every joke. Then, during a break in the program, her eyes drifted upward toward the seating sections. She noticed Caleb carrying a soccer ball someone had left behind. It rested casually under one arm as he continued working. A playful smile appeared on her face. "You know what?" she said into the microphone. "Let's have a little fun." Thousands of eyes followed her gaze. Cameras zoomed in. "Sir," she called, pointing toward Caleb. "The gentleman with the soccer ball." Caleb stopped walking. Sophie blinked nervously. Charlotte smiled confidently. "I'll give you $10,000 right now if you can juggle that ball 50 times. Laughter rolled across the stadium. Some people pulled out their phones. Others leaned forward eagerly. To them, it was harmless entertainment. A maintenance worker being challenged by a celebrity CEO. Charlotte expected an awkward smile and a polite refusal. Instead, Caleb looked down at the soccer ball in his hands. Then he looked at Sophie. His daughter gave a small shrug. "Could be fun," she said. Caleb's expression softened. He glanced back toward the field. For a brief moment, something unreadable passed through his eyes. Then he nodded once. And somewhere deep in the crowd, an older man suddenly froze as if he had just recognized a ghost. If this story has you hooked, take a second to subscribe. It really helps the channel. Also, are you Team CEO or Team Single Dad? Let me know in the comments. Now, back to the story. The laughter continued for a few seconds after Caleb nodded, but it no longer sounded quite as confident. Something about the way he accepted the challenge felt different. There was no nervous grin. No attempt to entertain the crowd. No effort to impress anyone. He simply adjusted the soccer ball in his hands and started walking toward the nearest stairway leading down to the field. The stadium buzzed with curiosity. Charlotte Bennett watched from midfield with her microphone lowered slightly. At first she assumed he had agreed because $10,000 could change a lot for a working father. Most people would have jumped at the opportunity. Yet the closer Caleb came, the more unusual he seemed. He walked with an easy calmness that did not match the pressure of thousands of eyes watching him. Beside Charlotte, several event organizers exchanged amused smiles. One cameraman whispered, "Maybe he played in high school." Another laughed. "If he gets 10 touches, I will be impressed." Sophie remained in the stands, leaning against the railing. She was smiling, but not because she expected her father to win a bet. She looked like someone watching a movie she had already seen before. The afternoon breeze drifted across the field, carrying the scent of fresh grass and sunscreen from the crowded seating sections. Flags fluttered above the stadium roofline. The giant video screen displayed Caleb's image as he stepped onto the turf. Thousands of spectators finally got a clear look at him. A maintenance worker in a faded shirt. Slight gray at his temples. Nothing flashy. Nothing remarkable. At least, that was what they thought. Charlotte lifted the microphone again. "What is your name?" she asked. "Caleb Mercer," he answered. "And have you ever done this before?" More laughter rolled through the crowd. Caleb glanced at the soccer ball. "A few times." The audience laughed even harder. Charlotte smiled. "Well, Mr. Mercer, 50 juggles earns $10,000. Caleb nodded politely. "That is very generous." Then he dropped the ball. The first touch barely seemed real. The ball rose exactly 18 inches from his foot and floated back down as though attached to an invisible string. Then came another touch. And another. Perfect control. Perfect balance. No wasted motion. Conversations throughout the stadium began to fade. 20 touches came effortlessly. 30 followed. 40. Caleb never looked down. Instead, his eyes wandered casually across the stadium as if he were admiring the weather. The ball obeyed him with impossible precision. 50 arrived without difficulty. The crowd expected him to stop. He did not. 60. 70. 80. The laughter vanished completely. Phones that had been raised to record a joke were now capturing something else entirely. Charlotte slowly lowered her microphone. Her smile disappeared. Caleb continued juggling while walking forward. The ball danced from foot to knee, from knee to shoulder, then back to his foot without ever touching the ground. Gasps replaced laughter. A few former athletes seated near the VIP section exchanged confused looks. One retired college coach stood up. "No," he whispered. "That is not normal." The giant screen zoomed closer. Every movement appeared effortless. Every touch arrived exactly where it needed to be. Near the front row, an older man wearing a faded soccer jacket suddenly gripped the railing so tightly his knuckles turned white. His eyes never left Caleb. The ball reached 100 touches. Then 150. Then 200. The entire stadium stood suspended in silence. And the older man finally whispered 3 words that nobody around him could quite understand. "It cannot be." The ball finally settled into Caleb Mercer's hands after more than 200 flawless touches, but nobody applauded. Not immediately. The silence itself felt louder than any cheering could have been. Thousands of people stared at him as if they had collectively misplaced a memory they could not quite reach. Caleb simply nodded politely and started walking toward the sideline. "Wait," Charlotte Bennett called. Her voice sounded different now. Less playful. Less certain. Caleb stopped. "Yes." Charlotte glanced toward the giant screen, then back at him. "Where did you learn to do that?" A few people laughed nervously, expecting a simple answer. Caleb adjusted the ball under his arm. "A long time ago." The response only deepened the mystery. Across the VIP section, the older man in a faded soccer jacket remained standing. His name was Walter Gaines, and 20 years earlier he had been one of the most respected soccer commentators in America. Age had silvered his hair and slowed his steps, but his memory for the game remained legendary. His eyes never left Caleb. Every movement. Every posture adjustment. Every touch on the ball. Walter felt a strange sensation building in his chest. Not recognition exactly. Something deeper. Something impossible. "Walter," a woman seated beside him asked. "Are you all right?" He barely heard her. "Look at the way he controls his first touch," Walter whispered. "Look at the way he shifts his balance before the ball arrives." The woman frowned. "What does that mean?" Walter swallowed. "It means I have seen that before." Down on the field, event staff began gathering around Charlotte. Some suggested continuing the fundraiser schedule. Others wanted Caleb interviewed on camera. Social media clips were already spreading through the crowd. Yet Charlotte seemed distracted. She kept looking toward Caleb. There was something unusual about him. Not confidence. Not arrogance. The opposite. He behaved like a man who genuinely did not care whether anyone noticed him. Those people were rare. Very rare. Sophie hurried down from the stands and reached her father. "That was fun," she said with a grin. Caleb laughed softly. "I suppose it was. You made everybody stare." "That was not the plan." "It kind of was." Caleb shook his head, smiling. The father and daughter started walking toward the service tunnel together. Charlotte watched them go. Then something caught her attention. As Sophie adjusted the strap of her backpack, a small object slipped out and landed on the concrete. Caleb did not notice. Sophie did not notice. Charlotte stepped forward and picked it up. It was an old keychain attached to a weathered metal tag. The engraving had faded with age, but one detail remained visible. A tiny soccer emblem beside a year. Charlotte narrowed her eyes. The numbers looked familiar. Before she could examine it further, Sophie turned around. "Oh, thank you," the girl said. Charlotte handed it back. "Where did you get that?" Sophie smiled proudly. "My dad keeps old stuff." Caleb immediately interrupted with gentle firmness. "Nothing important." Charlotte noticed the look they exchanged. It was brief. Almost invisible. Yet it felt like a door being quietly closed. Moments later they disappeared into the service tunnel. The stadium gradually returned to life. Conversations resumed. Music played through the speakers. But Walter Gaines remained frozen in place. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled out his phone. He opened an old digital archive containing photographs from international matches he had covered decades ago. Hundreds of faces scrolled across the screen. Then suddenly he stopped. One photograph appeared. A younger player standing beneath bright stadium lights. The image was nearly 15 years old. Walter stared at it. Then he looked toward the tunnel where Caleb had vanished. His face slowly drained of color. "No," he whispered. "There is no way." Yet deep inside, he already knew he was looking at the same man. The fundraiser ended just after sunset, but Charlotte Bennett could not stop thinking about the maintenance worker who had somehow turned a light-hearted challenge into the most talked-about moment of the day. Long after the guests had left and the stadium lights glowed against the darkening sky, she remained in her private office overlooking the field. Her assistants had already moved on to the next event. Sponsors were sending messages. Media outlets were requesting interviews. Yet Charlotte found herself replaying the same video clip over and over again. Caleb Mercer standing on the grass. The soccer ball floating around him with impossible precision. The complete absence of showmanship. Most talented people wanted attention. Caleb seemed determined to avoid it. That detail bothered her more than anything else. Across town, Caleb and Sophie were finishing dinner inside their modest two-bedroom house. The home sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees and well-worn sidewalks. It was not luxurious, but it felt warm. Family photographs covered the walls. School projects decorated the refrigerator. The scent of tomato soup still lingered in the kitchen. "Everybody at school is probably going to see the video," Sophie said. Caleb smiled. "Then I suppose I should prepare for embarrassment." "You are not embarrassed." "No, and you are definitely not normal." Caleb laughed softly. "That is a matter of opinion." Sophie carried her empty bowl to the sink. As she walked past the living room bookshelf, she stopped beside a small wooden storage box tucked into the corner. The box looked ordinary, but she opened it carefully. Inside rested a collection of keepsakes gathered over many years. Old photographs. Newspaper clippings. Medals. A faded captain's armband folded neatly beneath a piece of protective cloth. Sophie picked up a photograph and studied it. "Mom always said you never talked about this because it belonged to another life." Caleb's expression changed slightly. Not sadness. More like quiet reflection. "Your mother was wise. Were you happy back then?" Caleb looked toward a framed photograph hanging above the fireplace. It showed Sophie as a toddler sitting on her mother's lap. "Some days," he answered. "But I am happy now too." Meanwhile, downtown, Charlotte sat across from Walter Gaines inside a small restaurant near the waterfront. She had invited the retired commentator after receiving an unexpected message from him. Walter barely touched his coffee. His attention remained fixed on his tablet screen. "You recognized him," Charlotte said. Walter hesitated. "I recognized something." "What does that mean?" He enlarged a frozen image from the fundraiser video. Caleb's posture appeared on the screen. The angle of his shoulders. The positioning of his feet. The calm concentration in his eyes. Walter sighed slowly. "People think greatness is about fame. It is not. Real greatness leaves fingerprints." Charlotte frowned. "You are speaking in riddles." Walter looked up. "Because I am afraid of being wrong." Outside, rain began tapping softly against the restaurant windows. The city lights reflected across wet pavement. For several moments neither spoke. Then Walter finally reached into an old leather bag beside his chair. He removed a weathered magazine protected inside a clear plastic sleeve. The cover featured a stadium packed with nearly 80,000 fans. At the center stood a young player holding a trophy above his head. Charlotte stared at the image. The face was younger. The hair was darker. But the eyes were unmistakable. Her breath caught. "No," she whispered. Walter nodded slowly. "That is exactly what I said." Charlotte looked back at the cover. Then at the video still of Caleb Mercer. Then back again. The years had changed him, but not enough. And for the first time, she began to understand why a simple juggling demonstration had felt less like entertainment and more like watching a secret struggle to stay hidden. Charlotte Bennett did not sleep much that night. The magazine cover remained on her desk long after midnight, illuminated by the soft glow of a single lamp. Every few minutes she would look away, answer an email, review a contract, or study market reports. Then her eyes would drift back to the same photograph. The young athlete on the cover stood beneath a shower of confetti, smiling as tens of thousands celebrated around him. According to the headline, he had become one of the most beloved figures in international soccer. According to public records, he had disappeared almost 15 years ago. Yet somehow that same man was now repairing seats and sweeping walkways inside Harbor Point Stadium. The contradiction refused to make sense. Early the next morning, Charlotte arrived at her office before sunrise. The city skyline was still wrapped in shades of blue and silver when she instructed her research team to gather every archived article they could find. Within hours, her conference table was covered with printouts, photographs, and reports. The deeper she looked, the stranger the story became. Caleb Mercer had not faded gradually from public life. He had vanished almost overnight. One season he was appearing on magazine covers. The next, he was gone. No scandal. No public controversy. No dramatic farewell interview. Just silence. It was as though he had stepped off the world stage and closed the door behind him forever. Charlotte sat back in her chair, staring at an old newspaper clipping. The article described him as a player known not only for extraordinary skill but also for unusual humility. Teammates praised his character more than his accomplishments. Coaches described him as calm under pressure. Fans admired his kindness. The language sounded strangely familiar. It reminded her of the maintenance worker who had quietly accepted a challenge and then walked away without demanding recognition. Meanwhile, across town, Caleb's morning began like every other. He woke before dawn, brewed coffee, packed Sophie's lunch, and drove her to school in an aging pickup truck that had long since lost its showroom shine. The radio played softly as they traveled through quiet neighborhoods waking to a new day. "Everybody is talking about you online," Sophie said. Caleb kept his eyes on the road. "That usually means trouble." "Not this time." "We will see." Sophie smiled. "You know, most people would enjoy being famous." Caleb's answer came after a thoughtful pause. "Most people have not experienced both sides of it." Sophie looked out the window. She knew better than to push further. Some stories her father carried carefully, like fragile glass he preferred not to touch. Later that afternoon, Charlotte received an unexpected visitor. Walter Gaines arrived carrying another stack of archived material. This time his expression was more serious than before. "You found something," Charlotte said. Walter nodded. "I found what is missing." He placed a photograph on the table. It showed Caleb years earlier standing beside a woman with bright eyes and a warm smile. They looked young. Happy. Completely ordinary despite the fame surrounding them. "His wife?" Charlotte asked. "Emily Mercer," Walter replied quietly. "Everything changed after this period." Charlotte studied the photograph. There was no trophy. No stadium. No spotlight. Just two people looking at each other with unmistakable affection. Walter folded his hands. The public spent years trying to understand why he left. Most assumed he wanted privacy. Others thought he had lost interest in the sport. "And the truth?" Charlotte asked. Walter looked toward the window. "I do not think anyone ever knew the truth." For several seconds the room remained silent. Then Charlotte turned her attention back to the smiling woman in the photograph. Something deep inside her told her that the answer she was searching for had never been about soccer at all. And for the first time, she began to suspect that Caleb Mercer had not walked away from greatness. He had walked toward something he believed mattered more. 3 days later, Charlotte Bennett stood alone inside the archives room of her company headquarters. Rows of filing cabinets stretched beneath fluorescent lights that hummed softly overhead. Most executives would never have stepped foot in a room like this. Yet she found herself searching through old interviews, forgotten broadcasts, and records that nobody had touched in years. The deeper she looked into Caleb Mercer's past, the more one question haunted her. Why would a man at the height of international success willingly disappear? Outside, rain tapped gently against the building windows. The city moved through another busy afternoon while Charlotte sat before an aging monitor playing a grainy interview recorded nearly 16 years earlier. A younger Caleb appeared on screen after a championship match. Reporters crowded around him. Microphones stretched toward his face. Everyone wanted a quote. Everyone wanted a prediction about the future. Yet his attention kept drifting beyond the cameras. Finally a reporter asked what mattered most to him. The young athlete smiled. Family, he answered without hesitation. The game is a gift. Family is home. The clip ended. Charlotte stared at the dark screen. The answer seemed simple, almost ordinary. Yet something about it lingered. Later that evening, she drove to Harbor Point Stadium. The fundraiser was over. The crowds were gone. Empty seats surrounded the field like silent witnesses beneath the stadium lights. She found Caleb repairing a loose railing near section 112. The metallic sound of tools echoed through the quiet air. Working late? Charlotte asked. Caleb looked up. He appeared mildly surprised but not uncomfortable. Something needed fixing. You always answer questions like that. A faint smile crossed his face. Only when they have simple answers. Charlotte leaned against the railing. I have been learning more about you. Caleb returned his attention to the repair. That sounds dangerous. You could say that. The wind moved through the stadium. Somewhere in the distance, a maintenance vehicle beeped softly while backing up. For a moment neither spoke. Then Charlotte asked the question directly. Why did you leave? Caleb's hands became still. The silence lasted longer this time. Long enough for the sound of rustling flags above the stadium roof to become noticeable. Because life changed, he finally said. Charlotte waited. Caleb looked across the empty field. There was a season when I believed success meant standing in front of crowds. Then there was another season when I learned success could mean sitting beside a hospital bed holding someone's hand. Charlotte felt her chest tighten slightly. Caleb's voice remained calm, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. Emily became sick, he continued. At first we thought everything would be fine. Then doctors began using words neither of us wanted to hear. The stadium seemed even quieter now. Caleb rested one hand on the railing. People assume important decisions happen dramatically. Most of the time they do not. They happen quietly. One conversation. One promise. One moment when you realize there are things more valuable than applause. Charlotte looked down. She suddenly understood why no scandal existed. Why no public explanation had ever appeared. Some choices were too personal for headlines. And Sophie? She asked gently. A warmth entered Caleb's expression. She was little. She needed her parents. He paused. After Emily passed, she needed someone even more. Charlotte felt emotion rising unexpectedly. Not because the story was tragic, but because it was familiar in a way. Every day she watched ambitious people sacrifice relationships chasing recognition. Caleb had done the opposite. He had sacrificed recognition to protect what mattered most. The evening breeze drifted across the empty field carrying the scent of fresh grass. Caleb picked up his tools and prepared to continue working. Do you ever regret it? Charlotte asked softly. Caleb looked toward the photograph of Sophie taped inside his toolbox lid. His answer came immediately. Not for a single second. And in that moment, standing beneath stadium lights where greatness had once followed him everywhere, Charlotte Bennett realized she was looking at a man who had walked away from fame yet somehow become even greater because of it. The conversation should have ended there. A few kind words. A quiet goodbye. Then life returning to normal. Yet some stories refuse to stay hidden once the truth begins to surface. Over the following week, clips from the fundraiser continued spreading across social media. Millions watched the video of a maintenance worker casually controlling a soccer ball with impossible precision. Sports analysts debated his technique. Former players commented on his balance and timing. Fans created theories. Nobody knew the full story, but curiosity was growing by the hour. Inside her office, Charlotte Bennett watched the numbers climb across her screen. Every platform showed the same trend. Public interest was exploding. Her company had built entire campaigns around athletes with less attention than Caleb Mercer was receiving without even trying. Finally, after days of consideration, she made a decision. If the world wanted answers, there was only one honest way to provide them. She would create an event. Not a publicity stunt. Not a reality show spectacle. A genuine celebration of the game. A charity exhibition featuring former professionals, local talent, and youth athletes. Every dollar raised would support sports programs for underprivileged children. More importantly, it would give Caleb an opportunity to step onto a field one more time. When Charlotte presented the idea, Caleb immediately refused. No, he said calmly. They were sitting in a small stadium conference room overlooking the empty field. Absolutely not. Charlotte folded her arms. You have not even heard the full proposal. I heard enough. It is for charity. Then invite someone more qualified. Charlotte smiled slightly. That is the problem. I cannot find anyone more qualified. Caleb shook his head. The attention belongs to the kids. Exactly. Charlotte leaned forward. And imagine what it would mean for them to meet someone who chose character over fame. For a moment Caleb looked away toward the field below. Sunlight streamed through the glass windows, illuminating rows of empty seats. The stadium felt peaceful. Honest. I am not interested in becoming a story, he said quietly. You already are one. Before Charlotte could continue, the conference room door opened. Sophie stepped inside carrying a notebook from school. Sorry, she said. I forgot Dad was in a meeting. Charlotte smiled. Perfect timing. Maybe you can help. Caleb immediately narrowed his eyes. That sounds dangerous. Sophie laughed. What is happening? Charlotte explained the event. The charity fundraiser. The youth programs. The opportunity to inspire young athletes. Sophie listened carefully. Then she turned toward her father. How many kids would it help? Caleb sighed. You are supposed to be on my side. I am on your side. That answer worries me. Sophie sat down across from him. Dad, you always tell me that gifts are meant to be shared. Caleb opened his mouth to respond, then stopped. Charlotte noticed the exact moment he realized he had been trapped by his own wisdom. Sophie smiled innocently. Besides, it is one day. Caleb rubbed his forehead. You learn negotiation skills from someone. Probably. The room filled with gentle laughter. For the first time since the conversation began, Caleb seemed uncertain. Not because he feared the field. Not because he doubted himself. Because stepping back into that world meant reopening a chapter he had carefully closed years ago. The afternoon sunlight slowly shifted across the conference room floor. Finally Caleb looked at Sophie. Then at Charlotte. Then back toward the field waiting below. His answer came softly. One event. Charlotte blinked. That means yes. One event, Caleb repeated. For the children. Sophie jumped from her chair, unable to hide her excitement. Charlotte smiled despite herself. Outside the window, workers were already preparing banners for the upcoming fundraiser. Neither of them realized it yet, but the announcement would soon attract former teammates, legendary coaches, sports journalists, and thousands of spectators. And before long, Caleb Mercer would find himself standing once again in front of a crowd far larger than anyone expected. The day of the charity exhibition arrived beneath a bright autumn sky. By noon, Harbor Point Stadium was already overflowing with spectators. Families filled the lower sections. Youth teams arrived carrying banners and wearing matching uniforms. Former professional athletes mingled near the sidelines. Television crews moved through the concourses while reporters searched for interviews. What had begun as a small fundraiser had transformed into one of the most anticipated sports events the city had seen in years. Yet despite all the attention, the person everyone wanted to see remained hidden from view. Back inside a quiet service corridor beneath the stadium, Caleb Mercer sat alone on a wooden bench. The sounds of the crowd echoed faintly through concrete walls. Somewhere above him, thousands of voices blended into a distant roar. He stared down at a pair of worn soccer cleats resting beside him. The leather showed years of age. The laces had been replaced more than once. They were not expensive. They were simply familiar. Sophie sat beside him. "Nervous?" she asked. Caleb smiled. "A little." "Good. Good. It means you still care." Caleb laughed softly. "You are getting wiser every year. I learn from the best." Upstairs, Charlotte Bennett stood near midfield watching the stadium continue to fill. She had organized countless sporting events throughout her career, yet something about this day felt different. There was an energy she could not explain. People were not gathering because of a championship or a celebrity appearance. They were gathering because they sensed they were about to witness something authentic. Walter Gaines joined her near the sideline. "Look around," he said quietly. Charlotte followed his gaze. More than 30,000 people now filled the stadium. "I have never seen anything like this," she admitted. Walter nodded. "Neither have they." Minutes later the exhibition finally began. Youth players participated in skills competitions. Retired professionals entertained the crowd with stories and demonstrations. Donations continued pouring into the charity fund. The atmosphere felt joyful and relaxed. Then the announcer's voice echoed through the stadium speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Caleb Mercer." Applause erupted immediately. Caleb emerged from the tunnel wearing a simple navy athletic shirt and the same calm expression he always carried. No dramatic entrance. No music. No spotlight. He simply walked onto the field. Yet something remarkable happened. Thousands of people stood. Not because they had been instructed to. Not because a camera encouraged them. They stood because respect often recognizes itself before the mind fully understands why. Caleb waved politely and walked toward the center circle. Several younger athletes joined him for a friendly demonstration. The first challenge seemed simple enough. Control drills. Passing exercises. Accuracy contests. But within minutes the crowd realized they were watching something extraordinary. Every touch looked effortless. Every pass arrived exactly where it was needed. Every movement appeared graceful, economical, almost timeless. One former professional player missed a difficult volley. Caleb casually redirected the same ball with the outside of his foot without even looking. The stadium gasped. Another challenge followed. Then another. Each time, Caleb performed with quiet precision while refusing to draw attention to himself. Charlotte watched from the sideline in growing disbelief. She had seen countless elite athletes over the years. Yet there was something different about this. Great players often looked impressive. Caleb looked inevitable. As if the ball itself understood where it belonged. Then came the moment nobody expected. A massive video presentation suddenly appeared on the giant stadium screen. Charlotte turned toward it. So did everyone else. The first image showed an old international championship match. The second displayed a younger athlete lifting a trophy. The third revealed a close-up photograph from years ago. And when the camera zoomed in on the face, the entire stadium froze. Because for the first time, every person in attendance saw the truth at exactly the same moment. The maintenance worker standing quietly at midfield was not merely a talented former player. He was one of the greatest soccer legends of his generation. For several long seconds, nobody moved. The giant screen continued displaying photographs from another era while more images appeared one after another across the stadium. Championship matches. Historic goals. International tournaments. Crowds chanting his name. Magazine covers. Awards. Records. Moments that had once been known around the world but had slowly faded into memory. 30,000 people sat in complete silence. Even the children seemed to sense they were witnessing something larger than sports. Down on the field, Caleb Mercer remained exactly where he was. He did not wave. He did not celebrate. He did not attempt to reclaim the spotlight. He simply stood with the same quiet dignity he had carried while repairing seats and sweeping walkways. Charlotte Bennett felt her throat tighten. A week earlier she had offered $10,000 to a maintenance worker as part of a joke. Now she understood why Walter Gaines had looked so shaken. She understood why every touch on the ball had seemed effortless. More importantly, she understood how little she had known about the man standing before her. The silence finally broke when a young boy near the front row started clapping. One pair of hands became 10. 10 became 100. Then the entire stadium rose to its feet. The applause rolled across the stands like a wave. Not loud or frantic at first. Respectful. Grateful. Honest. Many people were cheering for the athlete they had just discovered. But many more were cheering for the father who had chosen a different path when life demanded it. Charlotte walked slowly onto the field. The microphone in her hand suddenly felt heavier than usual. She stopped a few feet from Caleb and looked directly at him. "I owe you an apology," she said. The stadium grew quiet again. Caleb looked slightly uncomfortable. "That is not necessary." "Yes," Charlotte replied. "It is." She took a slow breath. "I saw a maintenance worker and assumed I understood your story. I saw ordinary clothes and thought I knew your value. I was wrong." The crowd listened carefully. Charlotte continued. "The truth is, I did not challenge you because I recognized greatness. I challenged you because I failed to see it." Caleb shook his head gently. "Most people would have done the same." "Maybe," Charlotte said. "But that does not make it right." She reached into her pocket and removed a check. "The $10,000 still belongs to you." Caleb glanced at it and smiled. "Then I would like it to belong to the children." A murmur moved through the crowd. Charlotte stared at him. "All of it? Every dollar?" Sophie, standing nearby, smiled because the answer had never been in doubt. Caleb looked toward the young athletes gathered along the sideline. "Opportunities changed my life. Someone gave me a chance when I was young. If this helps even one child discover their own future, then the money will do far more good there than with me." For a moment Charlotte could not speak. Then she nodded. "In that case, my company will match it." The crowd erupted again. Applause echoed through the stadium. Donations immediately began pouring into the charity fund from sponsors, businesses, and fans watching around the country. By the end of the evening, enough money had been raised to support youth sports programs for years. As the sun dipped below the horizon, golden light spread across the field. Families began heading home. Players exchanged handshakes and photographs. The stadium slowly emptied. Caleb stood near the tunnel beside Sophie, preparing to leave just as quietly as he had arrived. Charlotte approached one final time. You know, she said softly, for someone who walked away from fame, you have a remarkable way of changing people's lives. Caleb looked at his daughter. Then at the field. Then back at Charlotte. A gentle smile appeared on his face. The game was never the greatest gift I received, he said. The people were. As he and Sophie disappeared into the tunnel, the stadium lights glowed against the evening sky, and those who had witnessed. The day carried home a lesson far more valuable than any trophy. Real greatness does not announce itself. It does not demand attention. It does not need applause to prove its worth. Sometimes real greatness quietly repairs broken seats, keeps old promises, raises a child with love, and waits patiently for the world to finally see what was there all along. Thanks for spending your time with us today. If this story meant something to you, don't forget to subscribe and support the channel. And I'm curious, how old are you, and did this story feel relatable to you? Let me know in the comments. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.